Is your church looking to choose a new online giving provider this year? Well, if so, this video is for you. There's no shortage of companies with really dozens of different organizations you could choose from to provide online giving for your church, but how do you know which one's the best? Well, we're gonna try and break it down for you in this video. Well, hey guys, I'm Thomas here from REACHRIGHT, and if you're looking to find an online giving provider for your church, you have come to the right video. But it is hard in this day and age with literally dozens of different companies, and they all seem to, in a lot of cases, offer almost the exact same thing. Well, not exactly, and that's what we want to do in this video, is break down some of the pros and cons and some things to consider when choosing an online giving provider. And I want to give you my top 4 choices in online giving providers, and I think one of them will probably be the right fit for just about every church out there. But I do want to know what you think. So before we get started, I'd love for you to write down in the comments below which online giving provider you currently use at your church, or if you don't use a provider at all, let us know maybe why you do that. While you're down there, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That's how we get the word out about this channel. We do new videos like this 2 times every single week. Your subscription would mean a lot to us. Thanks for being a part of the family. Now here at REACHRIGHT, we've been part of the church digital marketing world for the last 8 years, and we've done lots of content on our site about online giving for churches because it kind of falls into the same realm. In fact, right before the pandemic, we had one of the #1 ranking posts out there on our blog for finding an online giving provider back in 2019. And then the pandemic hit, and that post went from seeing about 10 or 20 views every day to seeing hundreds of views every single day, because all of a sudden every church in the world had to figure out, how do we start getting more of our donations online? And it has not slowed down since then, but as you've probably seen out there, there are more companies now providing online giving for churches than ever before. And here's the very plain reason why, is that online giving companies make a lot of money. Most of them charge some kind of a transaction fee or a revenue share, so that every time a donation is given to your church, the online giving company will make a portion of that, usually around 1% of all donations. Now that might not sound like a lot, because to a small church, what is just 1 little percent? But over time, those fees can really add up. And because of that, that's given rise to an enormous number of new companies popping up left and right. There's also a lot of consolidation that's been happening in this whole industry. In fact, I worked for a company before we started REACHRIGHT that was bought out by a company that primarily offered online giving services. And over the years, they've actually acquired 20 other online giving providers, as well as church website companies, church management software companies, with a goal of consolidating all these businesses. And the primary driver is to increase their revenue by getting more and more people signed up for their online giving service. That company, as you may know, is Ministry Brands, but they actually own several other companies. Some of them maybe you've used, like Easy Tithe or MoGive or Kindred, and there's dozens of other organizations that still have their own brand, but really fall under the Ministry Brands family of companies. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that you should know, that when you see all these companies, know that if their pricing is very similar, chances are they're all part of the same company. So with that said, let me share one other thing before we get into my 4 favorite online giving companies for you to consider. In most cases, the best online giving provider for your church is one that you're probably already working with already. If your church management software offers an online giving option, well, in a lot of cases, that'll just make sense to use that if the fees aren't too different, because it'll make it really easy to get all of that donor information and contact info into your system, and it just makes it easier for all your administrative people. With that said, let me share with you again my 4 favorite online giving providers, and the ones, if I was just starting out my research, these are the ones I'd look at first. The first one I want to mention is Tithely. Now, Tithely came on the scene a few years back. They're not a new company, but they haven't been around for as long as some of the other providers. They really did a great job in building what I would call the simplest and easiest system for most churches to use. There's no monthly subscription fees unless you're using some of their extra services there at Tithely. And also, if you're using Breeze church management software, which my church has used most recently, you'll probably already know that Tithely acquired Breeze and really made church management software and online giving really an easy integration if you're using both of those systems together. And before we get any further, let me mention what Tithely's pricing looks like. Where they do make a lot of their money, and what makes them maybe not the most economical choice, is that their transaction fees, or the money that they make on each transaction, is some of the highest that you'll see out there. Those fees range from 2.9% for Visa, MasterCard, and Discover Card transactions, and all the way up to 3.5% on American Express charges. So you're gonna pay a pretty sizable chunk of whatever people give to your church back to Tithely and fees. There's other fees like 1% for ACH transactions, and every transaction has a 30-cent fee just to cover some of their transactional costs. Now, I'm not here to say that there's anything wrong with charging those kinds of fees. I, as a business owner, I am charged fees every time I run a credit card transaction. My company pays 2.9% on every transaction we do, but it's just something that you have to be comfortable with as a church and something that you need to consider. So if you're just looking for the easiest solution, in most cases, I find that Tithely is a really great choice, especially if you're using their Breeze church management software already. Next up, and really the polar opposite, I'd say, of a company like Tithely, is a company called RebelGive, or also known as Nucleus Giving. Now, these two products are actually the same product, but is offered by the people over at Pro Church Tools, and their unique bent is that they do away with the revenue sharing model that most other online giving providers charge. Instead of charging a larger percentage of every credit card transaction, they have a much smaller fee, capped at 1.9% of every transaction, and none of those 30-cent transaction fees. And it's even better for ACH transactions, where really your cost is zero. Now, to make up for this, they have a monthly fee that you would pay directly to RebelGive each month for that service. And this monthly fee scales depending on the size of church. If you're a very small church, you're gonna be looking at close to $29 a month, and it goes all the way up to close to $200 a month for some of the larger churches out there. But in the end, they actually even guarantee that you will save money by not paying all of those transaction fees. And the math does seem to add up. So maybe you're wondering this: if they don't practice rev share, why am I still paying 1.9% on every transaction? Well, the fact is that if you're going to offer people the ability to give with credit cards, there is no way around the fact that there will be credit card processing fees. Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they are going to get theirs, and they're going to find a way to do that. So those are just sunk costs that there's really no way around. But the thing with RebelGive and Nucleus Giving is that your donors will always be the one that cover the fees. So every cent of every donation comes directly to the church. And because the donors are typically covering the fees, they're usually much more likely to use an ACH transaction, which would lead to no fees at all. All that being said, and I really love what those guys over at RebelGive are doing. I love their product, I love their service. The one thing that I have a problem with when it comes to this model is I don't want my donors and the people giving to my church, I don't want them thinking about fees. The last thing I want them to encounter when they're in the midst of this experience giving to my church is for them to be thinking about what the percentage they're gonna have to pay and where it's gonna go and where it's gonna come from. There have been several studies that indicate that when we don't ask donors to cover the fees, there's a lot of evidence that they're likely to give more and give more often. So all things being equal, my preference would be that we didn't ask donors to do that. I actually did a whole video about this topic. We're gonna put it up in a card here so you can take a look. It'll also be down in the description. We did a whole deep dive on why you should probably stop asking donors to cover the fees. I hope you'll check that out. Moving on, the next one I would recommend you take a look at is a company called PushPay. Now, you've probably heard of PushPay. They're very well established, and I would say PushPay is probably going to be the best choice for very large churches. And case in point, as of about a year ago, 94 of the 100 largest churches in the country, they use PushPay as their online giving provider. Now, PushPay is a little bit more secretive when it comes to some of their pricing and how their business works. They don't reveal any of that on their website. I have been able to do some sleuth work for you, and I found that at PushPay, there's actually a monthly fee, and there is also individual transaction fees that are relatively high. We don't know exactly what those would be, and I imagine they can be negotiated depending on the size of your church. Again, remember, PushPay deals primarily with larger churches. So if you're a large church, you're probably going to expect to pay somewhere between 2.5% and 3% per transaction, and you're going to pay somewhere north of $100 a month in a subscription fee. So I would say that if you're a church of 500 typical attendance or more, you might want to take a peek at PushPay. Also, they've been acquiring some other companies, so if you use the church management software Church Community Builder, they might be the first place you would look just for that level of integration you might be looking for. Now, finally, the last one I want to mention, and the one that's best for a lot of churches' integration, is using Planning Center's online giving service. From my experience and what you're probably probably familiar with as well, is Planning Center. When it started, it was used primarily as a tool for worship teams to exchange worship lyrics and song charts so that Sunday morning was a seamless experience. Well, they've expanded into a whole suite of really great software for managing churches and day-to-day operations, which makes their online giving solution a great choice, because in quick polls of our audience here at REACHRIGHT, chances are you probably use something from Planning Center already. So if that's the case, you definitely want to take a look at Planning Center. And to that end, I really like Planning Center's fee structure. They do have a monthly subscription fee, and it is scalable depending on church size. It ranges anywhere from $14 a month to $199 a month for the largest churches. But with that, they have very low transaction costs. Their credit card fees are just 2.15% and 30 cents per transaction. So definitely on the lower end. And with the ACH transactions, all they're charging you is 30 cents per transaction. So if you have someone that's consistently giving $1,000 to your church every month via ACH, you're only paying 30 cents for that money to move hands, which is really a great deal. So all that being said, who actually is the winner in the end? Who is the best online giving provider for your church? Well, it depends on what you're optimizing for. If your church is optimizing for simplicity, I really don't think you can do anything much easier than using Tithely. It's an easy way to get things going. You probably have people in your church that can get it set up in a matter of a few hours, and you'll be off to the races doing online giving. If your main concern is getting the absolute lowest cost, no matter what, even if it might cost you a little bit in overall number of donations, well, I really love what they're doing over at RebelGive. It seems pretty simple as well. I just have some of those concerns about donors covering the fees. If you're a really large church, well, the best choice for you might be PushPay. Lots of other churches are using it, and it's something you might want to consider. And finally, if you're in the Planning Center suite and you're using some of their software, it's a no-brainer. You probably want to check out Planning Center. It really makes for a seamless integration. And if you haven't already, it would mean a lot to me if you would hit that subscribe button. Thanks for being a part of the REACHRIGHT family. We'll get you next time.